Picture, if you will, a soldier crouched in the sucking mud of the Western Front, his hands wrapped around a device that, honestly, didn't even exist when the war began. The tin can pressed against his ear carries whispers from a listening post some 50 yards ahead, transformed into an improvised telephone by a former telegraph operator who, remembered how sound travelled through his civilian equipment. This is the forgotten story of World War I, not the tale of generals and grand strategy, but of ordinary men who, brought the ingenuity of peacetime into the machinery of war. While we often imagine military conflict as the forge of innovation, the Great War revealed a different truth. It was the plumber, the mechanic, the photographer, and the electrician who revolutionized warfare, adapting the tools of their trades into instruments of survival and victory. When communication lines were severed by artillery barrages that turned the earth into a churning hell of mud and fire, former telephone engineers didn't, wait for replacement equipment from distant supply depots. They scavenged wire from destroyed buildings in nearby French villages, stripped insulation from damaged cables using their trench knives, and jury-rigged connections that, honestly, would have horrified their civilian supervisors, but saved countless lives. These men understood something the military establishment had yet to grasp. The principles governing civilian communication networks could be adapted, simplified, and ruggedized for battlefield conditions. They created listening devices from empty biscuit tins and salvaged medical stethoscopes, pressing them against wooden stakes driven into the trench floor to detect the vibrations of enemy tunneling operations. The eerie silence of no man's land would suddenly fill with the rhythmic scraping of entrenching tools echoing through the earth, giving defenders precious hours to prepare countermeasures. This wasn't innovation born in laboratories or war colleges. This was the streetwise knowledge of men who had strung telephone lines across American prairies and British countrysides, now applied to the desperate mathematics of survival. Photographers who once captured wedding portraits and street scenes found themselves perched in observation balloons and rickety aircraft, their civilian cameras, modified with faster shutters and wider lenses to map enemy positions. But the real revolution happened in the dark rooms, those cramped dugouts carved into trench walls where former chemists and photo developers worked by candlelight to process reconnaissance images. These men brought knowledge of chemical reactions and developing processes that honestly allowed intelligence officers to identify machine gun nests and artillery emplacements within hours rather than days. Meanwhile, theatrical costume designers and commercial artists, men who had once painted advertising billboards and staged backdrops, became the architects of deception. They understood color theory, perspective, and the way human eyes detected patterns. Their civilian expertise transformed into the art of camouflage, creating painted canvas screens that could hide artillery batteries and sniper positions. They studied the way light played across broken ground at different times of day, mixing paints to match not just color, but texture and shadow. An advertising painter from Manchester might spend hours observing how morning mist softened the edges of shell craters, then replicate that softness on a canvas hide that would shelter a forward observation post. The internal combustion engine arrived on the battlefield not as a perfected military tool, but as an unruly civilian technology that frustrated and failed with maddening regularity. Enter the garage mechanics, Men who had spent years coaxing temperamental automobiles to life on muddy rural roads and understanding the quirks of early engines. They adapted their civilian knowledge to battlefield conditions, creating workshops in abandoned barns where they performed mechanical surgery on tanks, trucks, and the first tentative aircraft. These mechanics knew that an engine's survival wasn't about following manuals written in pristine factories, but about improvisation, substitution, and intimate knowledge of how mechanical systems actually behaved under stress. When official replacement parts took weeks to arrive, a mechanic from Detroit would fabricate a piston ring from scrap metal, draw on his memory of machine tolerances, and get a supply truck moving again. The tank, that revolutionary weapon that would break the stalemate of trench warfare, succeeded not because of military engineering alone, but because civilian mechanics understood how to keep complicated machines running in impossible conditions. Standing at the edge of the 21st century, we face a world where the line between civilian and military innovation has blurred once more, though the direction has reversed. Yet the lessons from those muddy trenches remain crystalline and urgent. The Great War taught us that survival belongs not to those with the most resources, but to those who can adapt, improvise, and see possibility in the ordinary. Those soldiers succeeded because they brought the problem-solving mindset of civilian life into the chaos of war, refusing to accept that the absence of purpose-built equipment meant the absence of solutions. For anyone learning bushcraft, studying preparedness, or developing self-reliance skills, this history offers a profound truth. The tools matter less than the knowledge to use them creatively. The next time you practice fire starting or shelter building, remember those men who turned biscuit tins into telephones and advertising paint into life-saving camouflage. They survived not because they were warriors by nature, but because they were thinkers, tinkerers, and relentless problem-solvers. If this journey into the ingenuity of the past has sparked something in you, subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this video with anyone who understands that true preparedness begins in the mind, not the gear bag. History has lessons for those willing to listen, and survival remains an art worth mastering.